Good morning, everyone. I guess for a while you thought you were just going to be watching me on TV. It's wonderful to be here. I've always wanted to visit your beautiful country. So thank you very much for inviting me to come here. It's a privilege to be here and to have about an hour of your time. But let's talk about the future. We don't often get the time or the opportunity to look ahead. So now is a wonderful time to forget about the day-to-day and to get really excited about the newly possible. There is one question that we don't often ask, and it's this one. If we didn't know what the answer was, what would we make? Because when we live our lives and when we do everything that we do, we normally have an idea of what the answer looks like. We don't reimagine things. We don't rely on naivety. We think we know what the solution is. And this is a wonderful moment in time to actually take a step back and be much more ambitious and be much more thoughtful and innovative and create what we should be creating rather than what we think the answer is. I like to think about what someone would think if they arrived today in the modern world. Can you imagine a marketer from the 1800s or the 1900s looking at the world that we live in, the devices that we have? Imagine how profoundly excited they would be about the smartphone. Can you imagine how incredible it may be? Check my voice. Should I come back and get rewired or carry on? I'll carry on. Imagine things like 5G. Imagine e-commerce. Have you got another? Shall I use one of these ones? Have you got like a handheld? It's quite difficult to do this if you can't hear me. Like without the slides, it's possible. Without the voice, it's quite hard. I'll carry on. The canvas of possibility is absolutely amazing. We have this. Does this one work? Okay. The canvas of possibility is absolutely incredible. But again, we don't tend to think in those terms. We tend to rely on what we've done before. And at the same time, I think our industry is always under threat. I think as technology companies become more powerful, there is this assumption somehow that brands don't matter. There is this assumption somehow that people keep on making logical decisions, that brand building is ineffective or extravagant or unnecessary. Everything that we do has never been more important. The output of what we make is utterly, utterly essential. But at the same time, because this is a bit of an emotional roller coaster, we have this enormous possibility. What we do is unbelievably important, but at the same time, as an industry, we are incredibly lost. We are unbelievably confused about what to do. We are told that everything is changing. We are told that you either disrupt or you die. We're told that what we do is irrelevant. We are completely lost and incapable of knowing what direction to look in. In fact, the kind of delta between the promise of technology and what we actually experience as human beings is vast. We are told about wonderful videos made with AI. We are told about personalized advertising. We are told that as consumers, we can have conversations with brands. We are told that customer service has never been more important. But what we actually experience as normal human beings is complete crap. We were told that ads should be powerful and immersive, but this is a typical ad that you may see on the internet. This is Cadillac saying, "Be iconic," with an ad that's so small you can't see what's going on. We are told that the future of advertising is personalization, and I'm getting ads for women's orthopedic shoes. Perhaps they know something I don't. We are told that the future of ads is programmatic creative, and I'm automatically served an ad from TripAdvisor for what looks like a hotel I wouldn't enjoy that much. We are told that there is this rich data trail, that ads can be served at the right time, at the right place, to the right person, with beautiful large formats. But yet I'm being given an ad for Facebook as if I haven't been on it for the last 29 years. It's extraordinary. I am not complaining, I'm merely pointing out that we really have not yet understood the power of what's possible. This is a lovely ad from Renault in the UK. There are many reasons to love the all-new Renault Arcana. I'm sure there are. Maybe you might want to tell me some of them. You might want to show me what it looks like. Most people quite like looking at cars. Maybe it's a beautiful, seductive, wonderful, premium-looking vehicle. I'll never know. This is another car ad. I was searching for a sensibly priced car. And the technology is sophisticated enough to know that I'm in the market for a car. But it's not sophisticated enough to know what my budget is. Because I might be drawn towards the 2010 Dodge Caliber for $7,000. Or I might splurge a bit on a Bugatti Veyron. It's a really good example of the amazing power that's not quite working out. So we are in this environment where marketing technology is everywhere. And Israel, in particular, has an incredible pedigree of enormously profound and exciting marketing technology companies. And we are now, as an industry, spending over $100 billion a year on marketing technology with this enormous promise of what can happen. But again, it's just not working. You know, one time I start looking for a pair of glasses, and those glasses kind of haunt me wherever I go on the internet long after I've bought them. I mean, maybe this is really clever, because maybe they thought that people who were looking for glasses needed to see glasses everywhere because their eyesight wasn't that good. And this is just an ad that's served to me in Japanese. It's just very odd. Like, where did this idea that I suddenly started learning Japanese come from? What even is this product? I'm on the New York Times website. This is some of the most premium and incredible media that has ever been made, and I've been served an ad in Japanese for what looks like a circuit board printing pen. I've got no idea where we're going. So we are at this amazing moment in time. Each and every single one of you, by being in this room at this moment, has the power to create what advertising should be. We all get to understand what technology means. We get to understand how it's changing consumer behaviors. We get to understand what possibilities it creates. And we get to be the people working on the watch when this amazing potential arrives. And that's what this presentation is about. So there's 4 sections from now. I'm going to talk a bit about myself and my role. I'm going to talk about this moment in time. I'm going to talk quite a lot about AI. And then I'm going to do a Q&A with Omar. There's quite a lot in this. I don't ask you to make notes. I don't ask you to pay that much attention. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And you will all get copies of this. At the end, there is a QR code, and you can download this entire presentation whenever you would like. So a tiny bit about me. I've worked in a lot of agencies. I've worked client-side. I've worked in digital agencies. I've worked in innovation agencies. If I'm honest, in retrospect, it looks like quite a glamorous journey. Like it looks like I knew what I was doing. It looks like I kept on getting promoted. It wasn't like that at all. I kept on getting fired. I was always very curious, and I always wanted to experience different things. And what became really obvious to me on this journey was that as an industry, we were ignoring technology. As an industry, we were being quite lazy with how we approached technology, and we would take too much credit. So on the left here is a wonderful print ad from 1870. I mean, it would work quite well today, to be honest. And given the enormous excitement and power of change, our industry has decided to turn that into something like this. We've taken the visual cues, we've taken the language, and we pulled it through into the social media. We've taken TV ads from the past, and we've just stuck them on YouTube. We've taken formats like catalogs, and we pulled them through a digital frame to look like this. So I became very frustrated that we weren't more excited about technology. I became frustrated that as an industry, we were not more ambitious. So I started to do quite a lot of speaking, and I started to do quite a lot of writing. And I became known for being quite provocative, which always confused me because I often thought what I was saying was just quite common sense. In fact, the most common thing that happens after I do a presentation is people say, "Tom, that was really good, but you just kind of told me stuff I was already thinking, but nobody says." So I don't think I'm particularly provocative. I like to be nuanced. So in a world where people think that everything is changing or nothing is changing, I like to be in the middle and to see what is changing and what isn't, and in what ways it matters. So we are at a time where to be in the middle is quite difficult. Nuance is quite challenging. And people love talking about the fact that everything is going to be different soon. So you will go on the speaking circuit and everyone say that everyone's jobs are disappearing, that AI is going to do everything, that everything we know is useless. And it's just not true. So I also do a lot of consulting and advisory work because in reality, you understand how change really happens. You understand the motivations people have, you understand culture, you understand incentives, and it's that combination of writing and speaking and thinking and consulting that I think makes me a bit more helpful. So at this moment in time, I think there are an enormous number of myths about what we do. The first one is this idea that people are hard to reach. We get a lot of briefs in our industry for people who are hard to reach. These people here are extremely hard to reach. I think you've seen this before. These are the uncontacted tribes of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. They're infamous because anyone that's tried to get close has been stabbed by a spear. Brand awareness of Pepsi is very low here. But most of the time, these people are not on our briefs. Most of the time, our briefs are millennials. Most of the time, our briefs are normal people. Most people in the world are not remotely hard to reach because no matter what demographic, no matter what geography, we are surgically attached to our phones. So people are not remotely hard to reach. They're just very hard to engage. They're busy, they're doing stuff, they're living their life. That's the second myth. People are busy. Every time you ever get a brief in advertising, it's always for busy people. Busy dads, busy mums, busy millennials, busy Gen Z. If you actually plot how busy we really are, we're actually not that busy at all. People hate this. They want to think they're different. But the actual hours that we work per week, no matter what geography you're in, are lower than ever. We actually have an enormous amount of time. It just doesn't feel very free. and it doesn't feel very free because we've become addicted to stimulation. There's a modern thing called the loop. I don't know if many of you have heard of it, but it's where you wake up and you're a bit tired, so you check your phone, and then you go on LinkedIn, and then you go on Twitter, and then you go on Snapchat, and then you go back to LinkedIn, and then you check your emails, and then you go to WhatsApp, and then you go to Snapchat, and then you go to Twitter, and then you go to Instagram, and then you go to WhatsApp, and it's been 35 minutes, and you're still in bed, and you've got no idea what just happened. This is a very, very common feeling. This is a very, very common behavior. We're not busy. An average person who is 24 years old in the world will spend more of their awake time looking at a phone than not looking at a phone. We used to go online. Now, occasionally, we go offline. And even less occasionally, we leave the house and we go in this thing called the real world where you can touch things. We are not particularly busy. We are just very, very overstimulated. And we are very, very overwhelmed. We have no idea how to cope with technology. We have no idea of the etiquette of technology. We have no idea how to make decisions. We have no idea what to watch on TV. So every single brief that talks about people that are hard to reach is not true. It's hard to engage. And every brief that talks about people being busy, it's not true. They just need help. They just need help making decisions. And this is where brands come in. Again, it's very, very popular to say that brands are dead. Scott Galloway, who I have enormous amounts of respect for, he's obsessed with this idea that brands are dead. You know, the Amazon Dash button's going to kill brands. The internet's going to kill brands. Voice is going to kill brands. AI is going to kill brands. There is this assumption somehow that brands are illogical and they are unhelpful. And people keep on expecting brands to die. They expect every direct-to-consumer company to destroy Procter & Gamble or Beiersdorf or Unilever. People keep on thinking that if you have enough data and if you have enough technology, that somehow you can get into customers' minds. It's just not true. The value of brands continues to go up every single year. It goes up in every single category. It becomes more and more important in more and more domains, in more and more geographies every single year. And I actually think that Scott was right when he said that businesses have mistaken choice as a good thing. Consumers want less choice, but more confidence in them. There is no better way to help customers make decisions than with the power of a good brand. And if you don't realize quite how important brands are, travel to another market. If you ever try and go grocery shopping in Japan, it takes you hours because you just don't know what's good. If you ever try and choose a hotel in a country that you don't recognize, it's quite easy to rely on brands to help you make that decision. So I actually think that brands are more vital than ever because they help us make decisions and feel better about the decisions that we make, and they allow us to get back onto our phones and do something else. But just so you know, that doesn't mean that brands are incredibly important and we need to know everything about them. There is this weird obsession, I think, in this industry that people want to have conversations with brands, or people care about brand purpose, or people want to see your story of how you made the ad, or they want to see your video that you made about, you know, the provenance of your company. There's this really weird tension where brands are unbelievably important, but we need to know remarkably little about them. If you're choosing tires, you know, do you need to know the story of Dunlop or Continental or Pirelli, or do you just need to know they're good? If you're flying with an airline, do you need to know the names of the pilots, or do you just need to know that they're big and they have fairly decent planes? So there are some myths for this time. Some trends for this moment. We are a very divided industry, and I don't think we've recognized quite how different this industry is and quite how wide it is. We used to be divided by this line that was horizontal, and you were either working above the line or you're working below the line. And people didn't really know what that line was. They just knew if they were above it or below it. And then around about 2003, our whole industry adjusted, and we reoriented around this new line. And you were either in the online department or the offline department. And then over the last 10 or so years, we've kind of become something else. There has been this assumption that the offline department became the brand department, and the online department became the performance wing. And we now have these two very, very different worlds of advertising. We have the brand building world, and we have the performance world. The really big thing that the internet did was something that we don't often talk about. What it really did is it allowed normal companies and normal people to advertise. It democratized advertising. We went from having 20,000 absolutely vast companies with huge budgets who would use a lot of agencies to having about 20 million advertisers. And there were small bed and breakfasts, there were local gyms, there were people with the dream of selling a new type of shampoo. These were much, much smaller advertisers. So your average advertiser in the past was a huge company. And your modal or mean or median advertiser today is actually a much smaller entity. And that means when we think about advertising, we're starting to think about different things. Our preconceptions of what advertising is are quite different. And that's created this very, very different market where about half of the industry now and more than half of the spend is the performance industry. And about half of it is the brand industry. And they're completely different industries, and we don't yet recognize that. We think they're the same. So famously, the brand industry feels a little bit like Mad Men. It's full of suave characters. It's full of words like storytelling or films. And increasingly, the performance area feels like the maths people. It's full of kind of geeks. It's full of people who understand technology and precision more than they understand the world. Now, the people in the brand agency, they love talking about their work. They go to Cannes. They talk about things with the same illustrious language, and they look to each other. They look to each other and they look to trade media, whereas the people on the right, they obsess over dashboards. They're tracking every single element of every single campaign. The people on the left are in this industry of risk-taking. They love innovation. They love imagination. And the people on the right are in the business of experimentation. They enjoy A/B tests. They think they're there to tweak things. The people on the left are all about creativity. The people on the right are all about optimization. The people on the left wish that they made the famous gorilla ad. The people on the right are dreaming of dashboards and more data. The people on the left, they need people to feel something. It's all about feelings, it's about emotions, it's about stuff that is ethereal. And the people on the right need people to buy something right now, otherwise it's been a failure. And we don't quite understand quite how different these industries are. And they're actually both wrong. The people who are building brands are removed from what it is to be a human today. And the people on the right are removed from how advertising actually works. Because the very weird thing about advertising is that we know that it works, but we still don't really understand how it works. I can walk around my house, and apparently there's 20,000 items in an average house, and I know that I bought things because of ads, but I could never explain to you what ad I saw. I know that I have seen a lot of advertising online, but I don't believe, in all honesty, that I've ever clicked on an ad deliberately. So this is creating this very huge shift in the industry. And what's really happening as more and more money goes into performance, it's changing the entire culture of the industry. So as an industry, we assume that performance advertising is more sophisticated. And we presume that that becomes the playbook to follow. And that means we're getting obsessed with short-termism. Unless an ad affected someone immediately, we think it's failed. It means that we're becoming less risk tolerant. We don't just want to take a leap of faith, we want to have proof that it's going to work. And we've become completely obsessed with attribution. In the modern era, it's almost better to claim success than it is to actually create success. We've become rooted in this idea that people are logical and that advertising is logical and that what we do needs to be rational. And we've also seen that the money moves closer and closer to the point of purchase. Because the closer that you can get to people actually doing something, the more easy it is to show data that shows it works. This is not a bad thing. None of the changes that I talk about here are worrying. They are all things that we should just recognize and talk to each other about. And we should work across our teams to make sure that we can reconcile these things. I also think we're a bit lost. I talked about this earlier. It happened a long time ago. But about 18 years ago, the CEO of a furniture company called Restoration Hardware looked at their SEO. And they figured out that over a couple of years, their teams of people had got really good at knowing what keywords to buy. They'd got really good at buying restoration hardware, and they'd got really good at buying misspellings of it. And for a long period of time, this advertising looked like the most effective advertising they'd ever done, because everyone was clicking on the results. What they realized was that people who were already typing in restoration hardware were probably going to end up on restoration hardware. And this money that appeared to be the most powerful and effective money they were spending was actually a complete waste of time. Now, at the time that this happened, there was a huge shockwave in the industry. It was thought there would likely be repercussions because everyone would realize that spending money where it appears to be most effective is not necessarily the way to do things. That if you merely get in the way of people that are already going to do something, that you were wasting your money. But actually, no one ever really noticed. And we're now in this kind of curious situation where I think about this. If you were a marketer from the 1940s or any other period of time, how would you go about your job today? Like, what things have changed that matters? What should you do about mobile advertising? Does print still work? Does TV still create conversations? You'd end up with other questions, like how did advertising used to work? How does it work now? You'd be thinking about media. Like, the biggest problem that most global clients now face is they don't know how to spend their money. They used to start off by spending millions on TV, and then spending millions on print, and then a few million on outdoor. And it was already quite obvious what their media plan should look like. And now, very large companies come to me and they acknowledge that they actually have no idea how to even start that process. Some people will look to media mix modeling, other people will look to last year's plans, other people will look to consumer research. We don't know about the levels of fraud. We never talk about this. I feel like someone might take me out if I did. But we are in an industry that has enormous levels of fraud, and nobody wants to talk about it. Measurement. It's quite interesting because the things in life that are most easy to measure tend to be the most pointless things. We can measure how much money we have, but we can't really measure our happiness. We can measure whether people click on an ad, but we don't really know what that means. And actually, most studies done show that click-through rates for most forms of advertising actually have no correlation with business outputs whatsoever. So we have these very big sort of existential questions. How do we stand up for what we know to work? If an ad takes a long time to work, if an ad looks like wastage on a media plan, but we know that it works, how do we stand up for it? So we are in this environment where people are lost. And I think it's really useful if, as an industry, we come together and we acknowledge some of these questions. We should be much more comfortable having honest discussions with each other about the ambiguity that we face and about the confusion that we face. Because the degree to which this industry is incredible, but the degree to which this industry is lost really hits me. Screenified, so the third of these trends is screens. It's quite obvious in a way, but screens are everywhere now. And these screens are incredible. The other day, I moved apartment, and I wanted to get a really big picture printed out and framed. And it turned out it was much cheaper to buy a huge TV and to stick the picture on the TV than it was to get it framed. So we can almost look at the modern world as one where screens are like wallpaper. So we start to see these screens proliferate everywhere. It could be large format outdoor ads at airports. This is a car valet station in Sao Paulo. It could be in retailers. It could be in the car. It might be in airports. This is Rome Airport, which now feels like a giant Minority Report experience. Even shelf edge labels. Like, no one expects people to come to conferences and talk about shelf edge labels, but shelf edge labels are now prime real estate. The technology is there to make screens thinner, to make them brighter, to make them last longer, to make them bend. We really, really, really are surrounded by these new places to make messages. Ads are also becoming more insidious. As things like ad blocking rise, and as people increasingly stop watching TV and glance at their phones, a lot of people are looking at the entire world and thinking about other places that we can put ads. This is also combining with the screenification of the world. So now we see the gasoline pumps have ads. We see the fridge doors in America become screens for advertising. We see that influencer marketing is taking off. We see that bananas are now promoting films. And we see this kind of new canvas for advertising. This is something I own called the Amazon Echo Show. And it was remarkably cheap. And I realized it was remarkably cheap because they use it to place ads. And I'm fine with that. But the ads themselves are kind of not really ads. You know, we kind of know what an ad's supposed to look like. This is more of a nudge. This is it simply reminding me that I'm running out of coffee and acknowledging the fact that that's very important to me. And this becomes quite a nice way to think about ads. Like, is this intrusive? Not really. Is it helpful? Yes. Does it help me make decisions? Yes. Is it paid media space? Sort of. Is this sort of ambiguity that we're now working with? And there will be new forms of advertising. A screen like ChatGPT, opportunities like Grok. We are going to have these new windows to place ads, and it becomes a really exciting brief to think about. What forms of advertising, what contexts for advertising, what places for advertising are we not yet making the most of? And that leads quite nicely on to, I think, the last one here, which is intimate data. So that device, the Amazon Echo Show, it knew a lot about me. We have screens that know a lot about us. When I grew up, my parents had a couple of rules for me, and one of them was to not sit too close to the TV. I don't know why, but it was just what you did. We are now very close to the TV. Our phones know absolutely everything about us. Even my watch. My watch knows where I'm supposed to be. It knows the weather. It knows my calendar for the day. It knows the temperature. It knows what items are arriving from Amazon. We have this unbelievably rich source of data. And we have a lot of data that people are okay with us using. We have this really interesting combination of very intimate data and in some cases the permission to use it. Now, so far, there have been very famous and successful campaigns that use that data on aggregate. So we can take all of the data in the world and anonymize it, and then people are happy with it. I see increasingly there being huge opportunities to use that data where we have permission to be more helpful. We're seeing some of it used in gentle ways. So this is Sydney Airport, and when you arrive at the airport, you're given this ad, which tells you in real time how long it would take for an Uber to arrive. But I think this really powerful combination of very rich data trail and permission to use it and a different architecture for advertising becomes really exciting. Someone kind of called it programmatic creative, but it's essentially acknowledging the fact that advertising is made up of different elements. And the placement of it, the creation of it, the special offer, these are all dynamic elements that can be used to make advertising that is helpful. At the moment, I'm working with a big car company in America to try and make it easier for their car dealers to make ads. And it's very illogical to expect every car dealer to make their own ads. Instead, they become modular units. So they become a mixture of locally generated assets and globally generated assets, and then headlines and offers which are supplied in real time in person. And this, I think, becomes a really exciting way to think about ads. Actually, the last one here, advertising and commerce are colliding. For a long time, these industries were thought to be very separate. You know, advertising people didn't think they were in the dirty business of sales. But increasingly, you can buy anything that's ever been made anywhere on the planet just by using your phone. So the whole world around us is starting to see these opportunities where advertising and commerce blend. It could be physical in-store retail, or it could be journeys. This is an ad that I was served on TV many, many years ago that was asking me to talk to my Alexa to buy Ben & Jerry's ice cream. It's not particularly exciting, and it may not work that well, but it's a good example of how you can start to think holistically about your environment and how different screens and different actions can work in unison. In particular, we have this trend which is for headless commerce. And this is this idea that by taking a piece of code which links you to an e-commerce website, basically everything around you becomes a store. Social media becomes a store. Billboards become stores. Anywhere with a QR code or anywhere with an API is effectively the storefront. So those are some of the trends for now. And let's talk about AI. You may think that AI is a big deal, or you may think it's a fad. It doesn't really matter. AI is an unbelievably good excuse to be more ambitious. It's an unbelievably good reason to drive change. It basically gives you permission to have much, much bigger conversations. As I said before, I'm quite nuanced about AI. I don't think it's a bubble, but I also don't think that it's going to become self-aware and kill us all. I don't think it's going to change everything. I don't think it's going to have enormous impacts on most things, but I think it's very, very exciting. One of the reasons I'm not as enthusiastic as others is I think it's become a bit of a useless term. I think it's become a marketing term. I think lots and lots of things that we used to call something else are now called AI. What used to be called a chatbot is now AI. What used to be called a macro is now AI. AI has an unbelievably big array of parts. Robots are AI, drones are AI. But most of the time when we're talking about AI in this industry, we're really talking about generative AI. So if we just focus on generative AI, we are still dealing with a lot of very different things. Generative AI is everything from code to text, to images, to video, to voice, and so on. I'm going to explain very briefly how it works, and many of you will know more than me about this. But essentially, at the heart of generative AI is this idea that if you have enough data and enough computing power, then you can start to see patterns in data. And everything that is generative AI is really exploring and exploiting the idea of patterns in data. So, back about 30 years ago, researchers uploaded millions and millions of pictures of cats and millions of pictures of dogs, and they defined certain attributes that made a cat, and a dog a dog. And it started to recognize images. If you did that with enough cats and enough dogs, it could tell the difference. If you then uploaded more things, it could start to recognize what other things were. And for a long time, it was very bad. So I did a talk for Adobe in about 2017, and I used these images. AI was extremely bad at telling the difference between a puppy or a bagel. Terrible at knowing the difference between a chihuahua and a muffin. Awful with fried chicken and labradoodles. Terrible with parrots and guacamole. It was food and animals. I'm not sure why. But then it got really good. So it's now able to understand what an item is very, very quickly. It's able to understand the relationships between items. It's able to see threats. It's able to see security risks. It's able to use facial recognition to pick up emotions. We're in a situation where image recognition is really good. So what? People realize you could turn it the other way around. So rather than showing someone an image and it's saying what it is, you can say what it is and it will make it. So again, in 2017, I presented these. And you can just about see what they are. But they were very, very bad. And then very, very quickly, it got very, very good. So in 2021 and 2022, we saw enormous progress with how good image generation was. And we are now, as you all know, at a place where you can effectively create images of anything that you might want to do. What does Nike shoes inspired by Van Gogh look like? Make me a beautiful image in a soulful way to sell sunglasses. We now realize that we can make videos, because a video is just 24 images per second. And I'm sure you have all experimented with this, but we now have the ability to make videos of giraffes going through downtown Manhattan. We can make videos of vox pops of drunk people in New Orleans. We can kind of make videos of everything. Fishermen saying poetry. So we're in this really interesting time, and the videos are starting to become more easy to edit and more easy to control. So this is a piece of software, I think, from Google that allows you to upload 2 reference images. You know, a beautiful dress and a kind of weird hallway with cabinets, and you can create quite specifically the type of video that you want. You can now make code. You know, famously, code is now more accessible than ever. I was a little bit distrusting of this, so I actually asked someone on the internet to make a site for me. I kind of did a challenge on LinkedIn where I said, you know, if this code writing is so good, make me a dog grooming website with 2 locations in Miami. And within about 15 minutes, a random teacher from Nairobi had made a dog grooming business with 2 locations in Miami, which just goes to show how accessible this technology is. But of course, AI can also generate text. You can ask it to make a poem, but text is actually a lot more than just ad copy. When you actually think about it, text is kind of everything that we do. Text is your emails, text is contracts, text is advice, text is insights, text is a business strategy, text is market research, text is a tutor that makes you better, text is product names, text is advertising copy. This list itself was something that I asked AI to make for me. So we're kind of in this weird environment where we have a whole array of AI-based tools that do vastly different things. Sometimes this technology is making calendar appointments for us. Sometimes this technology is making advertising. Sometimes it's making decisions. And it became obvious to me that when something was so general and it was so broad, we needed to really think about it in terms of meaning. And one way that you can digest all of these different meanings, I think, is to put it into these 3 different buckets. So AI is this very powerful tool for automating some of the work that we do. And it frees up more time for us to focus on matters. AI can be an advisor to us. It can summarize things, it can make recommendations, it can help us think, it can become a conversational agent that makes us improve. And it can also be an explorer. There is this wonderful question, can AI be more creative? And it's well worth discussing where it can and how it can. But something that seems particularly powerful with AI is how we can use it for us to be much more creative. How can it provoke us into removing assumptions? How can it challenge us to be more bold in how we think? Now, the impacts of AI on the industry happen in all sorts of directions. Even if I'm asked to make a presentation for 1 whole hour just about AI and advertising, it's very difficult. Because AI is as wide and as general as something like the internet. And if you ever had to write a presentation about the internet in 2000 about how it would change the world, it would be impossible. Because the internet would change what we made. It would change why we made it. It would change how we made it. It would change how we planned media. It would change how we measured things. It would change how we assessed, how we optimized. It would change how we worked. It would change how we recruit. The internet changed our consumer behaviors. So when you tend to look at AI, you have to ask the very same questions. Not how do we adapt what we've done around it, but how do we sort of rethink what we do. At the moment, I don't find AI in advertising very exciting. A lot of the philosophy behind AI is about averageness. It takes everything that's ever been done before and it finds common relationships between its past. And it tends to optimize. So it will try different headlines and it will focus on what appears to work best. Now, all of those methodologies are about convergence. They're about convergence into the middle. They become about averageness. So I keep on seeing time and time again, people show case studies of AI work, and it's acceptable, it's passable, it's okay. So you can make things like this. People are very excited about the idea that you can now make print ads and digital ads in seconds. These are fine. But we are not in the business of fine. We are in the business of remarkable. We are in the business of making people feel something. We are in the business of doing something that makes people challenge how they think. We are in the business of getting noticed. We are in the business of standing out in all sorts of ways. And therefore, at the moment, I find AI to be most helpful for doing the things that we don't really want to do, that don't really matter, to free ourselves up to have longer to spend on the things that do. So AI making product listing copy, AI generating SEO keywords, AI translating instruction manuals. There are very many questions to be asking about AI. How does AI change the way that consumers spend their time? Will people spend their life on AI chatbots rather than social media? Will AI change the way that people shop? Will it change the reasons for people to buy things? Will it change the way that we make our work? Will it change how agencies operate? There are some very, very exciting questions to ask. But the advice about that is dependent on two things. One is the very specific situations that you're in. And two is the pace of change of this technology. The hardest thing in AI right now is knowing when the right time there is to leap on it. But I think that this is a really, really good moment in time to almost take a step back, to experiment with these products, to enjoy working with them, and to put ourselves in the consumer situation and to really, really rethink what we do. There's this wonderful quote from Marshall McLuhan, first we shape our tools and then they shape us. So it's a really good time to think, how do we not just apply new technology to what we do, but how do we rethink what we've done? So what should ads look like knowing everything we know and knowing everything that AI can do? What should marketing look like given the power of AI? What should business models look like? What should workflows look like? What should departments look like? What should our jobs look like? And then we come back to this question. If we've never known what we were supposed to make, if we'd never known what the answer was supposed to be, if we'd never known the business model that we assumed we had to follow, what would we now make? And I think now is the perfect time to do that. Thank you very much, everyone.
תודה רבה, תום, על ההרצאה מרתקת. ועכשיו לראיון עם תום, אני רוצה להזמין את המומחה לחדשנות דיגיטלית בישראל, והאיש האחראי על הבאתו של תום לארץ, קבלו את עומר מיליביצקי.
Thank you very much, Tom. מחיאות כפיים לתום. Thank you for a brilliant speech. Very inspiring. I wrote a few questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time for all of them, but I'll start. You often say that the world doesn't lack technology. You've said it a lot during this talk. It lacks imagination. How do you think large organizations which are used to thinking in terms of KPIs and budgets can bring imagination back to their culture?
I've got quite a practical answer to this. As an industry, we enjoy hanging out with each other, and we all talk the same language, and we all acknowledge that creativity is powerful, we all think that imagination is important, and we live in our own bubble. And then we get quite frustrated when we try to talk to people that are not in our bubble. It's frustrating to talk to an accountant that doesn't understand ideas. It's frustrating to talk to a CEO that has board meetings where things have to be concrete. And generally speaking, our industry, when we're faced with people that are different, we tend to come back and we talk to each other more and we refuse to talk their language. So it's quite simple, really. Like, if we're gonna have senior conversations with people who make big decisions, who we work in a very rational way, how do we get better at those conversations? How do we start to use their language? How do we empathize more with their situations? How do we fit around their hurdles? And how can we present what we do in a much more sophisticated and robust and data-supported way? So it sounds annoying, but it's on us to go to them and to convince them with the language that they speak.
So what you're saying, we need a lot of courage.
A lot of courage, but also evidence. I think we tend to think that we can sell in at work on our charisma, on our relationships, on our passion. That's true, but we also need to have robust material. We need to point to examples of other companies that have done it. There are wonderful companies, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Dyson, whether it's Nespresso, Procter & Gamble. Big companies can innovate, but we also need to do the work to make a more powerful, logical, sensible, easy argument, and then sort of bring people with us on that journey.
Cool. You argue that real innovation happens when we change the questions, not when we add new answers. What kind of questions should organizations be asking themselves in 2026 to avoid falling behind?
AI is the kind of obvious thing that everyone is talking about. And it's so big and it's so amorphous and it's so often talked about that it feels like a buzzword. But I do think if there's one question that businesses should be asking, again, it's in that middle. It's not the assumption that AI takes everyone's jobs. It's not the assumption that your company is going to die. It's just to look at AI, to take a step back, look at your workers and how they work, look at your customers and how they buy, and to start getting really excited about the possibilities. The way that we apply technology always happens in two ways. The first way is we apply it to where it's easiest to apply, and we take what we've done and we improve it slightly. That's where we are with AI at the moment. The second stage is where we make something better. And I think the most helpful question we can ask in meetings is, what are the possibilities that we're not seeing? What does this technology mean that we can do that we used to dream of doing before, but we assumed was impossible?
Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, everyone.
תודה רבה. Thank you.